Amira's wedding invitation appeared on my phone like a sudden jolt, sending a shockwave through my system. It wasn't just a simple notification. It felt like a message from a different world, one that I wasn't a part of anymore. "You're invited to Amira's wedding." The words kept flashing on my screen, but it took a moment for them to fully sink in. Was this real? How had I not known anything about this? Amira, my cousin, the one I'd always been there for, had kept me in the dark about this life-changing event. The girl I had spent countless hours with as a child, the one I had stayed up late with, sharing our dreams, had become a stranger. I remembered all the times I had put her first. When she needed someone, I was always there. Whether it was helping with finances, covering for her mistakes, or listening to her complaints, but now all of that seemed forgotten. I had never imagined that Amira's wedding would arrive with such a sense of betrayal. There had been no conversations, no hints, nothing, just an invitation. "No, I've been planning this." "No, hey, I'd like you to be a part of it." For a moment, I couldn't help but feel a wave of anger wash over me. I stared at my phone, watching the blinking cursor, waiting for my decision. Should I respond? Should I confront her? Should I even go? It was a question I didn't have an answer to, but the invitation lingered, and so did the pain of feeling forgotten. Left behind when all I had ever done was care. The days following the arrival of Amira's wedding invitation were a blur. My phone buzzed continuously with notifications and messages from family members. The pressure was mounting, but the most unbearable thing was the growing distance between me and Amira. It wasn't just about the wedding, it was everything that had built up over the years. The shared memories, the promises, the late-night conversations. All of it seemed to dissolve in front of my eyes. I couldn't stop replaying the memories of our childhood, the bond we had once shared. We were inseparable back then. Amira was my closest friend, my confidant. Our lives intertwined in ways only siblings could understand. I was always there for her, whether it was when she faced difficulties with her parents, or when she was struggling in school, or when she just needed someone to listen to her heartaches. I had been her emotional anchor. But what about me, I thought? When was the last time I felt like I had a person in my life who would stand by me the way I had for her? The silence between us over the years had become unbearable. The last few years especially had been like an ocean of distance. I had watched her grow into the woman she was today, and yet somewhere along the way our paths diverged without either of us acknowledging it. I tried to remember when things had started to shift. It wasn't a single moment. It was a series of small events, moments of neglect that added up to something far larger than I could have imagined. Amira had always been the center of attention. She was the one everyone gravitated toward at family gatherings, always surrounded by people laughing, admiring her, seeking her approval. But with me, it was different. It wasn't about admiration. It was about unconditional support. At least that's what I thought. One incident came to mind. A year ago, when she had been struggling with her job and had reached out to me for financial help. I had immediately helped without a second thought. I gave her the money she needed, not asking for any repayment, because that's what family did for each other. She had thanked me, of course, but what I didn't expect was how quickly things shifted. She didn't keep in touch after that. It was as if my gesture had placed an invisible wall between us. I had thought it was a temporary thing, but I should have known better. It wasn't long before I began to realize that the lack of communication wasn't just about her being busy. It was something deeper, something unspoken, and yet I continued to reach out. I kept texting her, calling her, inviting her to gatherings, but she would rarely respond. When she did, it was brief, polite, but distant. It hurt, but I convinced myself that maybe she was just going through a phase, or maybe life had gotten in the way. But now seeing that invitation, just an impersonal, cold message on my screen, made me wonder if she had already moved on without me. The wedding wasn't just a celebration of her new life. It was a symbol of everything that had gone unsaid between us. The fact that she didn't even think to tell me in person, to let me know in a way that felt like I was still a part of her life, made it clear to me that I was no longer important to her. But maybe, I thought, maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just my insecurities talking. So I tried to reach out again. I sent her a message trying to be casual, asking if we could meet. There was no response for days, and when she finally replied, her message was short and blunt. Sorry, I've been busy with wedding preparations. Talk later. That was it. No acknowledgement of the years we had spent together, no explanation of why things had changed. In that moment, a cold realization settled over me. It wasn't just the wedding that stung, it was everything that had happened before it and everything that hadn't happened since. She had moved on without me, and now it felt like the world was reminding me of it. But how could I feel this way? How could someone who had been a part of my life for so long, someone I had given so much to, be so indifferent? I started to feel like I was clinging to a version of our relationship that no longer existed. And the more I tried to hold on, the more I realized that I had no control over it. I was powerless. The more I thought about it, the more I found myself questioning my role in all of this. Had I asked too much of her? Was I too persistent? Was I suffocating her with my need for connection? Or was I simply not enough? And then the questions turned darker. Was this how people treated those who were always there for them? Was this the price I paid for being selfless? I started to feel like a fool, trying to fix something that was beyond fixing. I could see the wedding unfolding in my mind. The beautiful decorations, the dress, the laughter, the celebration. And yet, all I could think about was how this day, the happiest day of her life, would be a reminder of how easily I had been forgotten. I stared at the invitation again, this time feeling an even deeper sense of betrayal. I had always believed in the strength of family, but now I wasn't so sure anymore. Could it really be that easy for people to walk away from you when you're not looking? Could it really be that simple to move on while leaving someone behind? The distance between us wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Amira had found her place in the world without me, and now I had to figure out how to find my place without her. The world I once knew, the one where we were each other's constant, was gone. And as I read her wedding invitation once more, I couldn't help but wonder if I was just a chapter in her past that she was ready to close. It was a few days before the wedding when I received yet another call from Amira. She had never been one to ask for much, at least not in the past. But these last few years, things had been different. I had started to notice a pattern. Whenever she was in a bind, she would call me. And when things were good, I was left in the background, a shadow in her life. This time, though, her request was different. She was desperate. Hey, I know this is last minute. Her voice trembled as though the words were weighing heavily on her. But I'm in a tight spot with some of the wedding expenses. I just need a little more to cover a few things, and I was hoping you could help me out. Again. There it was, the familiar weight of her voice, the tone that made me feel like I was the only one who could help her. It was as if every time she needed something, I was expected to be the one to provide. It wasn't just a request, it was a demand, one that came wrapped in the cloak of sibling love. I knew the drill by now. I knew she wasn't asking because she had no other choice, but because she knew I would say yes. I clenched the phone tighter, feeling the anger bubbling up inside me. Amira, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I've helped you before. A lot. I've given you everything I could. But I'm at my limit now. There was silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought she hadn't heard me. But then her voice came through, sharp and hurt, like a dagger aimed directly at my heart. Are you seriously saying no? Are you really going to do this to me now, when it's for my wedding? She hissed, her words cutting through the air. I thought you were family. I thought you cared about me. I guess I was wrong. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I had been expecting a more grateful tone, not this. Her sense of entitlement was overwhelming, and for the first time in years, I felt the full weight of how much I had been taken for granted. I've been more than patient with you, Amira, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of frustration and pain. I've given you so much. I've always been there for you when you needed me. But where were you when I needed someone? Why is it always me who has to fix everything? Why does it always fall on me? She didn't respond right away. I could hear the faint sound of her breath on the other end. And then her voice came through again, this time bitter and accusatory. You're selfish. You know that? She spat. I've always relied on you, and now you're just going to leave me hanging? You can't even help me out when I need it the most. You really think this is about the money? It's about you abandoning me, about you not caring enough to make sure everything goes smoothly. You're not just ruining my wedding, you're ruining everything." The words were like knives, each one piercing deeper than the last. I had always known she was high maintenance, but I had never realized how deep her entitlement went. She wasn't just upset about the money, she was angry that I was no longer playing the role she expected me to. "I've been there for you in ways no one else has, Amira," I said, my voice finally cracking. "But I can't keep doing this. I can't keep putting myself second to your needs. I've given enough, and I need you to understand that. I've always been the one to pick up the pieces, but I can't do it anymore. I'm not just your fixer. I'm a person too." There was a long pause, and then I heard her sob. It wasn't the kind of sob that came from understanding or remorse. It was the kind of sob that came from anger. Anger at me for not playing my part in her world. "Fine," she said, her voice low but trembling with emotion. "If that's how you feel, then I guess I'll just handle it on my own. You can forget about being a part of my wedding. You're not even worth it." The words stung, but I stood my ground. I had to. I had always been the one to give in, the one to put everyone else's needs first. But this time, I wasn't going to be that person anymore. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me just because she thought I owed her something. "Amira," I said, my voice firm, "this isn't just about the money. This is about respect. And I deserve respect, just like everyone else in this family. I'm not your backup anymore. I'm not your safety net. I've spent too many years letting you take from me without ever giving anything back. I'm done with that." The line went silent for a moment, and then I heard her voice crack again, filled with frustration and disbelief. "I can't believe this," she whispered, as if the reality of what I had said was too much for her to process. "I don't know why you're doing this to me. You're supposed to be my sister. You're supposed to help me." "I am your sister," I said, my voice softening slightly. "But I can't help you if you don't respect me. I can't keep sacrificing myself for you when you don't even care. I've had enough." The conversation ended with a click, the kind of finality that left no room for reconciliation. But it was in that moment, with the weight of her words still echoing in my ears, that I realized something. I had spent so much of my life trying to be everything to everyone, fixing problems, offering support, giving all of myself, and in return I had received nothing but emotional neglect. I had allowed myself to be used, to be the one everyone called when they needed help, and the one they forgot when things were going well. But that was over. I wasn't going to let anyone take advantage of me anymore. It wasn't just Amira. It was my entire family. I had been playing the role of the dependable one for so long that they had all come to expect it. But now I was done. I wasn't going to fix anyone's problems anymore, not unless they understood my worth and showed me the respect I deserved. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing up for myself. It wasn't easy, and I wasn't sure what would come next, but I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer going to be the fixer. I was no longer going to be the one who was always there, no matter the cost. The world had to change. I had to change, and I was ready. The day of Amira's wedding arrived with a heavy stillness hanging in the air. The excitement and celebration felt distant, almost irrelevant to me now. I had made my decision, and nothing was going to change that. I wasn't going to the wedding. I wasn't going to stand there smiling through clenched teeth while my family continued to take me for granted. I had given enough. It was time to let go. I hadn't expected it to be easy. The familiar pull of obligation, of being the reliable one, was hard to ignore. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that being there would be a lie. I couldn't pretend anymore, not after everything that had happened. And so, I stayed home. My phone buzzed incessantly throughout the day. Calls from my mother, texts from distant relatives, all of them asking the same thing. "Where are you? Why aren't you here? Don't you care about your sister?" The messages grew increasingly accusatory, each one more desperate than the last. But I didn't respond. I had nothing left to say. I was done explaining myself to them. Then came a call from my mother. Her voice was tight with frustration and hurt. "You're really doing this, aren't you?" she said, the words sharp. Amira is devastated, and you're making it worse. How can you do this to her on her wedding day? You're being so selfish. I felt the guilt begin to creep in, but I pushed it down. I couldn't let her manipulate me into feeling like I was the one at fault. I had been the one who had always sacrificed, always put my needs last. I had done it for years, and where had that gotten me? Nowhere. I had no more energy to give. I'm not being selfish, I replied, my voice steady but tinged with sadness. I'm taking care of myself for once. I've done enough, and I won't be treated like I'm invisible anymore. Amira has had everything from me, and I'm done. There was a long pause, and then my mother's voice softened. You've changed. I don't even recognize you anymore. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words, but I didn't waver. Maybe that's for the best. When the wedding ceremony began, I stayed home, my phone buzzing every few minutes with a new message or call. The sound of it felt like a constant reminder of the choice I had made, of the family I was no longer a part of. It felt like a betrayal to them, but for the first time in years, it felt like freedom to me. Later in the day, I received a message from a cousin. The text was short, but it stung nonetheless. Amira's upset. She's not taking it well. She says you're ruining everything. I read the message several times, each time feeling the weight of Amira's words, each time thinking about how far we had drifted. I remembered all the times I had been there for her, all the times I had stood by her side, and yet she couldn't see why I had made this choice. She couldn't understand that this wasn't about the wedding or the money. It was about my own boundaries, my own well-being. But in that moment, a part of me still felt a flicker of doubt. Was I being too harsh? Should I have gone? Should I have just put on a brave face for the sake of family harmony? The doubts lingered, but they didn't control me. I had already made my choice, and it was too late to turn back now. As the evening wore on, I found myself reflecting on everything that had led up to this moment. My life had always been consumed by the needs of others. My family, my sister, my mother, they had all come to rely on me as a crutch, an emotional and financial safety net. But somewhere along the way, I had lost myself. I had become the person who gave without ever receiving, the one who fixed everyone's problems, but never had anyone to turn to when I needed help. But now I was seeing things differently. This wasn't just about saying no to a wedding. It was about saying no to the pattern that had controlled my life for so long. It was about breaking free from the roles I had been assigned. The fixer, the giver, the one who always put others first. And as much as it hurt, I knew it was the right choice. I thought about the future. Could I keep living like this? Always giving and never receiving? The thought made my chest tighten. I had spent so much time trying to please everyone else, trying to fix their problems, that I had completely neglected my own needs. But that was going to change now. I wasn't going to let anyone, family or otherwise, define who I was or what I was worth. I looked around at my empty apartment, at the quiet solitude that surrounded me. It was strange, this feeling of being alone. But it wasn't a loneliness that came from being abandoned. It was a solitude that felt like peace, like space to finally breathe. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of my own life. My phone buzzed again, another message from my mother. "This isn't you," she wrote. "You've always been there for your sister. Don't throw it all away." But I wasn't throwing anything away. I was letting go of something that had never served me. The idea that I had to be everything to everyone. The idea that my worth was defined by what I could give, by what I could sacrifice. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone anymore. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking in the quiet. The pain of the situation was still there, sharp and raw, but underneath it, there was a sense of relief. I had made my choice. I had chosen myself for once. And in that moment, I realized that this was the beginning of something new. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was mine to shape. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. In the days following Amira's wedding, life began to settle into a new rhythm. The immediate aftermath of my decision was still raw, but it felt like I had crossed some kind of threshold. No longer bound by the endless demands of my family, I found myself taking time to reconnect with the parts of myself I had neglected for so long. I started seeing friends again, people I hadn't spoken to in months because I had been too busy juggling everyone else's problems. We had long conversations, the kind I hadn't had in years. I remembered what it felt like to laugh without guilt, to simply enjoy a moment without worrying about what someone else might need from me. There was also Alex, someone I had started to see before everything spiraled into chaos. We had barely managed to keep our connection alive, with me often canceling plans or brushing him off in favor of family obligations. But now, with the weight of my family's demands finally lifted, I found myself reaching out to him again. Our conversations flowed easily, and the spark we had shared before seemed to reignite. As I spent more time with Alex, I also focused on myself. I began dedicating time to my career, something I had always put on the back burner. I signed up for a few online courses and started researching opportunities for growth in my field. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't defined by my role as the family's caretaker or emotional support system. I was free to be just me. In the quiet moments when I reflected on how far I'd come, a sense of peace settled in. I realized that for the first time in years, I didn't feel the crushing weight of my family's expectations hanging over me. I was no longer their fixer, their provider, their emotional crutch. I had freed myself from that cycle, and it felt like I could breathe again. I felt empowered, like I was finally taking control of my own narrative. But there was one final thing I needed to do. A week after the wedding, my phone buzzed with a message from Amira. The message was brief, but it still stung. "I wish you could have been there. You've really hurt me." I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling the old guilt trying to creep in. But then I remembered everything I had learned over the past few weeks. I had made a choice for myself, and I wasn't going to apologize for it. Not anymore. I took a deep breath, picked up the phone, and dialed her number. When she answered, her voice was quieter than I had expected. "You're really not going to apologize, are you?" I paused, letting her words settle. Then, in a calm but firm voice, I replied, "No, I'm not. I did what was best for me. I know it hurt you, but I'm not going to keep sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of others. I've spent my whole life doing that, and I'm done." There was a long silence on the other end, and I could almost hear her processing what I had said. Finally, she spoke again, but her tone was different this time. "I still don't understand, but I guess I get it." I felt a small sense of relief, but mostly I felt a deep sense of closure. This conversation, this small moment of understanding, marked my growth. I had found the strength to stand up for myself, to stop being a people pleaser at the expense of my own well-being. As I ended the call, I realized that my journey wasn't just about cutting ties with my family or setting boundaries. It was about reclaiming my own voice. I had learned that it's okay to prioritize my own needs, and that standing up for myself didn't make me a bad person. In fact, it made me stronger. The sense of peace I had longed for was finally here. It wasn't about having everything perfect or reconciling all my relationships. It was about knowing that I was worthy of respect, that my needs mattered too. And so, as I moved forward, I did so with confidence and clarity. I wasn't defined by my family's expectations anymore. I was carving out my own path, one that was filled with personal growth, joy, and the freedom to live life on my own terms. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly living for myself, and that was more than enough. If this story resonated with you, remember, it's okay to put yourself first. Setting boundaries is key to protecting your peace. Subscribe for more stories and inspiration on reclaiming your life. Where are you listening from today? Share your thoughts and take the first step toward a healthier, more balanced you.